All of our productions at GCTV are brought to you in part by The Arbors at Greenfield, assisted living community providing a unique balance of independence and personal care that offers residents and families the most precious gift of all, peace of mind. Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it, close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com, call them at 773-0838, and check them out on Facebook. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all the productions at Greenfield Community Television.
So this is an especially exciting time, I think, to be talking about net metering in Massachusetts, because just earlier this week there were some legislative developments that really showed the Commonwealth's commitment to moving solar forward. You'll hear more about that, what came of that legislation, and then some of the debate that happened leading up to it from some of our panelists. In my role at the Hampshire Council of Governments, I help connect municipalities, businesses, and residents across Western Mass with local solar net metering credits through our Hampshire Solar Program in cooperation with Nexamp, who Joe is representing today. I've had a chance to see firsthand the savings that ratepayers are experiencing, and also the stake that participating really gives people in investing in Massachusetts solar. So I'm really excited to be here this morning. Each of our panelists is going to have approximately 10 minutes to speak, and then we will do a Q&A session at the end. So we're going to start this morning with Jim Barry. He is the Western Massachusetts Regional Coordinator for the Department of Energy Resources Green Communities Division. The Green Communities Division strives to help Massachusetts cities and towns find clean energy solutions that reduce long-term energy costs and strengthen local economies. The division provides technical assistance and financial support for municipalities to improve energy efficiency and to increase the amount of renewable energy that's being used in public buildings. Jim provides hands-on, locally focused assistance to communities as they work with DOER to pursue a clean energy future. Jim also has over 15 years of experience as a town official, including serving on the Belchertown Board of Selectmen, the Belchertown Planning Board, and the Belchertown Housing Authority. Jim will be introducing exactly what solar net metering is, how different towns and ratepayers are using it across the state, and how it's evolved over time in Massachusetts.
Thank you. So I'm Jim Barry from, it's not Belchertown, Belchertown. You have to say it right or you don't get credit for being from Belchertown. So I've been working for the state for about 5 years. My job is to go from town to town, Hamden, Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire County, and helping town governments understand their options for energy efficiency, and renewable energy. As such, we ask and get answered a lot of questions, and net metering is one of them. So when I asked you to speak briefly about what is it and what are some of the basic definitions that we all have the same level playing field of what we're talking about before we go too much further, I went to the DPU website and found a 28-page FAQ system, which I decided I was not going to read to you. I did shrink it down a bit. So basically what is net metering? As you probably know, net metering is the ability for someone who has a solar system or a wind system or renewable energy system to get credit for excess electricity that is generated by their system. A prime example is if you have solar on your roof and during the day it's making lots of electricity and you're off at work and you don't have the TV on for the dog, then the excess electricity can go out the door, out the window, down the line, and down the street to the neighbors' houses to get using it. And you get credit for the kilowatt hours that your system produces that you're not using. It takes a special electric meter that can spin forwards and backwards. So during the day, your meter is spinning backwards to get electricity goes out the door. And at night when you come home and turn on the news to watch your local public access TV, to watch us people on TV, then the meter spins forwards, and the difference between what you use from the utility and what you put out into the street, that net difference is what you get credit for. That's what's called net metering, the difference between the pluses and the minuses. It's been available since the 1980s, but in 2008 with the Green Communities Act, some substantial changes were made. In particular, it increased the size or capacity of the net metering facilities that would be allowed. It used to be a limited amount of net metering. Now it can be a bigger system for net metering, up to 2 megawatts. It also increased the value of the credits you could get for the electricity that went out on the street. It used to be about the wholesale value. Now it's about the retail value. As of today, we'll talk about what's going to happen next week and a little bit in a couple minutes. The other change was that it allowed customers who are doing net metering, who have a system, to allocate those credits to someone else, to another customer. So if you build a big system on your roof and then did energy efficiency, which is backwards, but some people do it that way, and you're using less electricity and your credits are being built up, do not expect the investor-owned utility to write you a check. They will let the credits build up and build up and build up, but you're allowed to allocate those credits to someone else in the same utility and in the same ISO zone, which means my wife wanted us, when we put the solar on the roof, to put a great big system on so we could give the credits to the kids. I said, I think we've done enough for the kids. They got through college and pay their own electric bill. But you could do that, or to the church of your choice. As you know, there's a cap on net metering. What does that all mean? The idea was when the legislation was passed, utilities would not be required to take absolutely everyone's electricity. So there was a cap placed on how much utilities were required to take. As of November 4th, the caps were 4% for private net metering facilities and 5% for public net metering facilities. So whatever amount of electricity they do at their peak, 5% of that is what they would take in as in the net metering system. The most recent legislation has raised that by 3% for both, which we'll hear about in a minute. Some of the other questions we get, I just heard this on a conference call the other day, because many municipalities are doing municipal aggregation, where you combine your electricity and then you buy electricity from someone else as kind of a group purchase. Well, how does the net metering credits work in that scheme? The idea is, if the customer receives combined billings, meaning that your competitive supplier's bill is on the same as your utility bill, the credits you get for net metering can be used on that bill. But if you get two separate bills from your competitive supplier and your electric utility company, the credits that you receive can only be used on the utilities bill. You can't send that credit to the your competitive supplier. So if you're thinking about choosing your competitive supplier, that might be a question you have if you have solar panels on your roof, is, by the way, can I use my net metering credits with you? The value of the credits would be based on, again, if you have a competitive supplier and you're paying less for electricity, the credits are calculated based on if you had gotten electricity from the utility at the basic rate. And you can use your net metering credits to offset your bill for your bill or someone else's bill. And can I receive both net metering credits and SRECs? The answer is yes. Those are two separate programs. completely different. One does not impact the other. So I'm going to pause there because I know there'll be other information being presented, and if there's more detailed questions about anything I can handle, I'll be happy to do it.
All right, great, thank you very much. So our second panelist is Stolle Singleton. She is the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. She joined the Baker-Polito administration in January of 2015, and she's been working with Secretary Beaton and the team at EEA to promote the administration's diverse energy agenda, which includes legislation to sustainably support the state's solar industry. Prior to joining the administration, she worked with the Grantham Research Institute for Climate Change and Environment at the London School of Economics, where she co-authored the 2015 Global Climate Legislation Study, a review of climate change legislation in 99 countries. This was released at the UNFCCC Climate Negotiations in Bonn, Germany in 2015. She's also worked in the Massachusetts legislature as a policy analyst, and she specialized in energy and environmental issues there. As a legislative staffer, she drafted over 20 individual pieces of legislation, numerous amendments, and was involved in the 2012 energy legislation, which was aimed at reducing costs for ratepayers and optimizing the Commonwealth's energy mix. She has a master's from the London School of Economics in political science and a BA from Franklin Marshall College. She's going to be speaking to us today about all of these recent developments in net metering legislation and the debate that surrounded that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jennifer. And thanks you guys for the opportunity to be here. Before jumping into an overview on solar and the specifics of what's going on this week, I wanted to sort of place that in the larger context of the Baker-Polito energy agenda. It's a really exciting time for the folks that are working in energy policies. I'm sure you guys know and the folks at this table know. It's also a really challenging time. Our region stands to lose about 10,000 megawatts of baseload generation as older generation plants come offline, and our electricity prices are consistently in the top 5 in the nation. We're truly at a crossroads when it comes to energy infrastructure investments, and as a Commonwealth, we need to rise to these challenges and to ensure a clean and reliable energy future. The Baker-Polito administration is pursuing a balanced and diversified energy portfolio, and as Governor Baker likes to call it, the combo platter. This includes clean baseload, reliable hydroelectric power, solar and wind energy, energy efficiency, and new technologies such as energy storage. A balanced and diversified portfolio will reduce the cost of energy for consumers, enable us to meet Massachusetts' aggressive targets under the Global Warming Solutions Act. For those of you that don't know, that's 25% GHG reduction over 1990 levels by 2020 and 80% by 2050. And finally, it will ensure that we have a safe, reliable, and resilient energy infrastructure for our residents and businesses. Last year, Governor Baker filed an act relative to energy sector compliance with the Global Warming Solutions Act. This legislation, it's Senate 1965, authorizes Massachusetts utilities to procure between 1,200 megawatts and 2,400 megawatts of reliable and clean baseload generation that's available 24/7, 365 days a year to meet the demand of Massachusetts and the region. Specifically, this bill authorizes the procurement of hydroelectric generation from the U.S. as well as Canada, and RPS Class 1 renewable energy, which includes wind and solar, firmed by baseload hydroelectric power. Additionally, in August of 2015, Governor Baker filed solar legislation, an act relative to long-term sustainable solar, that was House 3724, to provide both a short and long-term solution to ensure continued solar development at a reasonable cost to ratepayers. Solar incentives, net metering credits, and the solar renewable energy certificates that we've heard about just a second ago were created with the goal of jumpstarting a fledgling industry. And over the last several years, Massachusetts has been one of the top states in the country for installing solar capacity, ranking 4th in the nation in 2014, and last year was no exception in this growth. We already know that more than 15,000 projects were completed in 2015. The substantial packages of incentives that currently exist has allowed the industry to grow exponentially, and today we have about 1,100 megawatts of solar installed in the Commonwealth. However, these incentives ultimately do come at a cost to Massachusetts ratepayers. As the National Consumer Law Center has explained, these subsidies are disproportionately paid for by low-income residents and the majority of electric customers who do not have solar panels. Although the cost of solar installation has decreased, project costs have dropped in half since 2010. The incentives have stayed the same and are not necessarily consistent with the current maturity of the solar market. As you've probably heard, this week the legislature passed a solar bill in keeping with the governor's aims of transitioning the solar industry to a more self-sustaining model, bringing incentives in line with current market dynamics. This legislation, termed an act relative to solar energy, it's Senate 1979, although I don't think the language is available under that number quite yet, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in both branches of the House and the Senate, and will be on the governor's is on the governor's desk currently, and he plans to sign that on Monday. This legislation is a compromise between two different bills passed in the House and the Senate in the fall of 2015, and it achieves the Baker-Polito administration's goal of reducing the cost to ratepayers while strengthening the state's clean energy economy and helping us progress towards those Global Warming Solutions Act targets that I mentioned. The Baker-Polito administration understands that cities and towns across the Commonwealth continue to realize the economic and environmental benefits of solar development. And the bill will preserve assistance to municipalities and facilities long-term growth, to facilitate, long-term growth beyond 1,600 megawatts at a reduced cost to ratepayers. Specifically, the legislation provides immediate relief to the solar industry, as we heard, by increasing the private net metering caps from 4% of utilities' peak load to 7% of peak load, and increases the public net metering cap from 5% of utilities' peak load to 8%. This provides enough cap space to allow projects that are currently on the net metering cap waiting list to move forward and to progress, while providing an additional amount of about 683 megawatts of direct current cap space for new projects. Currently, there's about 176 megawatts of projects on the private cap waiting list of direct current projects, and about 80 megawatts of projects of direct current on the public cap waiting list. Essentially, this cap increase allows for a total of 2,085 megawatts of direct current solar development under the caps. Additionally, the bill preserves the Department of Energy Resources' broad authority to establish a next-generation solar incentive program after the current SREC 2 program that we heard about previously. And it will provide DOER with the flexibility to conduct a robust stakeholder process that involves the public and stakeholders before establishing this new incentive program. In an effort to lower the cost of net metering for non-participant ratepayers, as I mentioned, the bipartisan legislation sets the new credit value for the majority of solar projects at 60% of the full retail rate. That's about 12 to 19.2 cents a kilowatt hour. If there's a range because the cost fluctuates throughout the year depending. The bill preserves retail rate credits for municipal and government-owned projects and continues to exempt residential and small commercial projects from the net metering caps and any net metering credit reductions. Finally, recognizing that the next generation solar incentive will take time to develop, yesterday the Department of Energy Resources filed emergency regulations with the Secretary of State's office, which will address market uncertainty and establish a smooth transition from the current SREC 2 program to the next generation solar incentive. Specifically, these emergency regulations extend eligibility for SREC 2 to all projects greater than 25 kilowatts that can be constructed within 9 months of yesterday when they were filed, so that's, I think it's January 8th of 2017, and extend eligibility for SREC 2 to all projects that are smaller than 25 kilowatts that are interconnected to the grid by the start of the next program. In closing, it's both a very exciting and challenging time, like I said, to be involved in Massachusetts energy policy. As we look to ensure a clean energy future for generations to come, the Baker-Polito administration's approach hinges on 3 tenets: cost, carbon, and reliability. We want to lower the cost for residents and businesses, we want to increase reliability of the energy grid, and we want to meet our aggressive GHG reduction targets. Thanks again, you guys, for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. So our third panelist today is Joe Fiori. He's a business development manager at Nexamp, where he manages energy contracts with municipal, industrial, and commercial customers. In this role, he partners with municipalities across Massachusetts to successfully identify solar solutions that range from on-site installations to remote net metering projects that really maximize consistent revenue and long-term cost savings. Joe held policy and business development roles at Conservation Services Group, which is now Clear Result, prior to joining Nexamp. where he really drove the advancement of energy efficiency across the country. He received his BA from Middlebury College, and today he is going to be sharing his experience working with numerous municipalities across Massachusetts to secure net metering contracts and their associated savings.
Thanks, Jenny. So as Jennifer alluded to, Nexamp is a solar company. We're a commercial developer, which means we build projects.
Sorry.
Sure. Nexamp is a commercial developer, which means we build projects typically in the range of 500 kilowatts to 2 megawatts and up. So we're not the folks on residential rooftops doing those types of installations. It's larger installations, either on ground-mounted systems or on large rooftop arrays. So I think what I wanted to try to do is kind of bring home a little bit what this means for municipalities. We've heard a lot about what net metering is and how the Baker-Polito administration is looking to sort of frame the discussion and move it forward. And I think that's a pretty comprehensive overview for the I guess solar business world. We've had a tricky last 9 to 12 months where the cap, which is the allowable amount of solar capacity that is allowed on the grid, has been hit in National Grid. It's now been hit in Eversource, or I should say was, and I think Wamiko is right on the fringe. There's a little bit left in the private cap, but as you heard this week, they raised the cap by 3%. For us, we're trying to develop projects, get them ready to be interconnected, and for the last really 12 months, again, we haven't been able to do that. So right now, what you're going to see in Massachusetts over the next 6 months is really a frenzy of solar development and construction. The DOER regs basically stipulated that projects that are built by the end of this year will receive SREC 2s, which are really the incentive that drives solar. And what that means is, as a municipality, if you're looking to take advantage of a net metering project and receive net metering credits, I think this is an interesting time and really a time where if you want to take advantage of the best regulatory model and incentive model, now's the time to seriously consider it, because there's going to be a 60% reduction in the net metering rate, and the SREC 3 program is going to be scaled down. So the incentives are going to be lessened, and I think that's true across the board. No one's really debating that. What I wanted to briefly talk about is give an idea of who's done net metering, how many municipalities. It's between 1/2 and 2/3 of towns across the state. So we're talking over 170 municipalities. There's been a host of other government agencies, which are your fire districts, your water abatement plants, so in really what's driven that is a combination of the net metering and SRECs. There's over 400 solar companies in Massachusetts right now, and I would say maybe 10% have actually probably dropped out in the last year because of these regulations. And so now we're at this crossroad where if we can really ramp up activity, we can be in a pretty good position to move forward. It's not a long-term cap raise. It means we're going to be in this position probably a year from now. We're going to be in the same exact position because we figured out the model. We know how to make these projects move forward, and you alluded to pretty accurately that it frees up about 700 megawatts. There's already 170 on the private wait list already, so we're going to get there quickly. I will kind of just finish, and then I'll be available for questions. But I did want to talk about what the average contract looks like for a municipality. So typically these are 20-year agreements. And usually you're entering into an agreement with a developer, a net metering credit agreement, and that agreement is stipulating where you're receiving the net metering credits from and typically what the discount you're going to receive. So what we've seen, and it varies from utility, but we've seen a discount ranging from about 15% to 30%. What that means is we're trying to provide enough net metering credits, which are dollar credits, to offset your electricity costs, and you're going to pay or you're going to receive a guaranteed discount or a guaranteed fixed price. They're structured in two different ways, really. So for example, if you're getting a 20% discount and we gave, let's say, the town of Hatfield $100,000 of net metering credits, they would pay us $80,000 and their savings would be the difference, $20,000. So essentially it's a guaranteed way to save money on your electricity costs. And that's what, again, has driven development, because it's created really a very low risk way for municipalities to participate that allows the developer to lock in a revenue stream, which allows us to get financing and build projects. And that's really how net metering works on the ground level. And as you know, there's multiple ways to go about procuring those types of contracts. You can issue an RFP. You can go directly to a developer or talk to a neighboring town who's done net metering, and basically your objective is to figure out what's the best discount you can get, and is the entity, do they have a strong history, experience, qualifications, because again, this is a long-term contract. So that's just kind of a broad overview of where things are at. Happy to answer questions.
Great, thanks, Jim. So our final panelist this morning is going to be John Ward. So he was inspired to get into this field actually by his partner Claire's anti-nuclear activism. And in 2008, he ended a 26-year career as an automotive service manager so that he could really find a way to make a difference in the local energy sector. And later that same day, he was offered a partnership at the solar store of Greenfield, which he and Claire now own together. He is also a municipal official and is serving his third term on the Guild Select Board. John is going to speak to us today about how you can get involved in ongoing conversations about the future of net metering in Massachusetts and what some of those long-term scenarios might look like.
So there's so much wrong with the bills that were passed this week, so much wrong with Governor Baker's approach to solar, that I hardly know where to start, and I know that I'm not going to get all my pieces in. I will start by saying that both New York and California faced the same questions regarding net metering caps and rates. What those two states did, they both eliminated the caps entirely, so there is no cap, and they both retained full net metering credit. And I'd certainly like to have seen us go a little bit more in that direction than we have. For the solar industry to sell its soul for a 3% cap increase, I think was totally wrong. And I think the best way to do this is to help you people read through the lines of, between the lines of what we've heard so far today. Stolle spoke a lot about the cost of solar, the cost to ratepayers, the cost to non-participating ratepayers. And that's been a lot of the problem with the conversation in the last 2 years, is the utilities and certain other organizations have talked about cost, and nobody's talked about benefits at all. There have been no value of solar benefit studies done for Massachusetts. There have been a lot of value of solar benefits done in other states, and they'll come up with things like the benefits of having solar, not only to the participants, but the non-participating ratepayers, and in Massachusetts it would be the Commonwealth at large, where the benefits are 28 to 36 cents per kilowatt hour, but we're talking about the costs of 19 cents or too high. So we need to lower that to 60% of that value. In the bill that has been passed, the administration and the utilities have gotten a lot of what they've asked for. They've asked for that reduction in rates. And the solar industry has done their compromising with the utilities and with the administration, basically with a gun to their heads. This cap has been either looming or for the last year hit, where I think at this point 315 communities could not do net metered systems anything larger than residential household size. And so the companies like where Joe works are, laying people off, moving out of state, and the only way to move forward and to recover the sunk costs of what they already have put into projects moving forward, whether it's paying the utilities for the infrastructure upgrades that are needed, their development time in getting these projects moving forward. They stood to lose a lot of money if these caps did not get raised. So basically that sector of the solar industry said, you raise the caps, we've got jobs for the next year, we will take your scraps, but what's going to happen is when all of the changes that have been made hit the road, these companies are going to do the same thing. They are going to move somewhere where the economic climate for doing their business is better, like New York and California. And the large solar installation in Massachusetts is going to come to a screeching halt or be very, very much reduced from what it is now. And I'm not saying this because I'm affected by it in that way. My business will continue on because I operate in the sector that is below 25 kilowatts and is exempt from the net metering caps. However, there are two things that are going to affect me directly and affect all of the people in this room directly. One is that solar actually provides a benefit to ratepayers, non-participating ratepayers, and the Commonwealth at large. And when we have less solar going in this state, those benefits are going to be diminished. The utilities like to say that solar is what's driving electric costs up, and it's not. At 2% penetration, solar does not have an effect. ISO New England released a white paper draft a couple of weeks ago that showed production curves, demand curves during the day overlaid with solar production and the lowering of the peak. It's too much to explain in this, but the lowering of that peak actually benefits everyone in this room because it takes the highest cost highest cost generators out of the equation for basing your rates on. So we're losing that. The other thing that we're losing is we're losing the ability of having the large solar installers like Joe's company in here putting in the solar arrays that we don't do. We cannot do enough rooftops to make a dent or a large enough dent in global warming. We need the big companies as a solution, as part of the solution. We've been trying to work with them to get better legislation. They have not been necessarily going along with what we want because they need something now. They can't wait for better policy to come along. So people in this room, what can we do? Basically, there's another piece that's coming along to this. Part of the bills that have been introduced is the ability for the DPU to implement a minimum bill for solar users. That's not going to affect the big systems. That's not going to affect the people in Boston. What that's going to affect is that's going to affect the farmers in Western Massachusetts that have multiple accounts and want to allocate from one of their accounts to the other ones, on that same parcel, on their farm. low-income, community-shared solar arrays, real true community-shared solar arrays, they are not going to be financially viable now because of that 40% reduction in the net metering allowance. So what we need to watch is we need to watch the next DPU docket. The next DPU docket is going to ask for a couple of things. It's going to ask for a minimum bill on solar users. It's going to ask for, it's very likely going to ask for money for pipeline infrastructure and that type of thing to go in. The current administration is very pipeline-centric, Canadian hydro-centric, and has really thrown the solar industry under the bus. There's an omnibus energy bill that is going to be going through the legislature. I would like to see a piece on solar in that omnibus energy bill. The House at this point wants to say, look, we've dealt with solar, we've taken care of that problem, we don't want to deal with this anymore. House leadership really squashed the rank and file, and I'm very disappointed in the lack of democracy in the House at this point. And I think people in general, and the solar industry in particular, need to put more pressure on the House again. SREC 3 is going to come out. We need stakeholder participation there. We really need to make solar an issue this November. And not only this November, also in the gubernatorial election. We need to make solar an issue then. If anybody wants any more information, I think, maybe in the question and answer session we can try to deal with that. Thank you.
So we've obviously gotten a lot of information, just one comment, and diversity of opinion. So we wanted to open the floor to anybody who has a question. I think the easiest thing would probably be raise a hand. Feel free to ask something of a particular panelist, or ask, more generally. It looks like we'll have about 20 minutes to do questions.
So my question's for Singleton. My name's Jeff Singleton.
Oh, hi.
Your long lost cousin.
Have we emailed before?
Yes, we have. So I'm on the Modular Energy Committee, and I also write for the paper, and I'm writing an article on this thing. And I have two questions, quick ones, if such a thing, on this topic. One is, the mantra, your argument from the governor's point of view is that this is a balanced approach to balance long-term energy goal, including the U.S. targets, with savings to ratepayers. And what I'm curious about is, has there been any estimate as to what this does to the future of solar in Massachusetts? It's obviously going to cut back to some degree the amount of solar that's produced. Is there any quantitative projections of what this is actually going to do? And are there any quantitative projections of what the savings are to ratepayers?
Thank you, Jeff. So in terms of what this bill is going to do for the solar community, as I believe you've heard from Joe, that the solar industry for the past 9 months has sort of been stalling out because the caps have been reached. So on the legislative front, that's controlled by the legislature. Until the legislature increases or removes the caps, then that limits the amount of solar development that can qualify for net metering. And then the SREC cap had been reached, essentially. We had over 1,600 megawatts worth of projects that had applied for SREC 2. And as of yesterday, we have qualified 1,600 megawatts on the SREC side with the filing of the emergency regulations. So in essence, before this legislation was passed in the House and the Senate, and actually, it's not effective until it's signed by the governor, but until it's signed by the governor, the solar industry has started to stall out. And we were hearing from the solar community and them saying that, unless you raise the caps, unless you determine what the long-term solution is for a next generation solar incentive on the Department of Energy Resources side, then we will have some pretty significant job loss and some pretty detrimental impacts to the solar community. So we were definitely, pushing to have something pass in the legislature to provide that immediate relief via the cap raise, And as I mentioned, that cap raise of a total of 6% creates about 2,000 megawatts of direct current, a little bit over that total. And it's about a 680, 700 megawatts of direct current of space once you pull the projects off the waiting list that are there currently. So in terms of opportunity, there's without a doubt, now we have opportunity for solar development to continue, and we removed the risk of it stalling out because we were in a very serious situation where it was at risk of stalling out because there was pretty significant delay in getting this stuff forward. What was the second portion of your question?
Well, it's more of a medium, long-term question. It's like, in 2020, what is this going to do to the solar industry? In 2020 or 2025, what's the, I mean, I'm a low-income ratepayer. What's this going to do to my bill?
Right. So I actually was just pulling up some of my numbers on the cost. So we projected that the cost of the SRECs and net metering of 1,600 megawatts of installed essentially is a total impact of $5.5 billion over 10 years between 2015 and 2025. That's all stuff paid for by ratepayers. That's all paid for by the non-participant ratepayers. So in terms of costs, and that's just for 1,600 megawatts.
Do you have a sense of what that does for me?
Yes, and I actually can, hold on. So as a residential ratepayer, that's about $80 a year over 10 years, so on your bill. If you're a large commercial ratepayer, so if you're a hospital, that's about $87,000. So that's a pretty significant. That's pretty significant for the larger ratepayers. It's less significant for the residential ratepayers, but that's the real cost on your bill as a result of 1,600 megawatts under the current incentive structure. Obviously now we're adding to that cost by raising the cap, even though we are reducing the credit. So we're reducing the actual amount that it will be increased, but by reducing this credit, but there is a pretty real impact, and that's just for 1,600 megawatts. And like I said, now you have opened up the possibility for upwards of 2,000 megawatts, and it is the goal of the governor to see beyond 1,600 megawatts of development. We do need that to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals.
Sure. So I work in the Mass Save program, Energy Efficiency, and that's a program that's paid for by the ratepayers, and there are a number of non-participants in that program. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels between energy efficiency and solar. And I think back a few years when utilities were really opposed to energy efficiency. A lot of parallels. Ratepayers pay for it. It cuts into the income by reducing kilowatt hours. But somehow the state managed to kind of deal with that and made it to the point where now it's a real business, sub-business in the utilities that brings in a lot of cash, and it's its own business segment. And there are lots and lots of incentives, and there are the same issues in terms of non-participants, because everybody pays into the fund, but not everybody takes advantage of the fund. There are some areas that are not the same, but a lot of the impacts are similar in terms of reducing the income that the utility distribution companies have in terms of maintaining their infrastructure. But again, somehow, over a period of time, the state managed to address this, and I would challenge this administration to think about it that way, because there's a choice here. There's a choice, and I hate to see the state going backwards in this after all the advances that have been made in the past.
Can I address that? So I used to work at Conservation Services Group, and we were the program administrator for Mass Save on the residential side. So it's been really interesting to see how the energy efficiency industry was able to kind of work with the utilities, and then switching over, we're sort of kind of enemies. We're on the other side of this debate for sure. To put it kind of simply, and as you alluded to, utilities get a performance bonus for hitting energy efficiency targets.
Right.
They align the utility model such that they were able to make a return.
That's a subsidy to the utilities?
No, it's a
It's-
business.
It's a bonus.
It's a bonus, and it's included in ratepayers.
Oh, yes.
It's included in the system benefit charge.
How much does that cost ratepayers?
It's 1.5% of their of the cost of the energy efficiency program. I'm not sure what the number is there. But I think the important thing there, though, is that they aligned utility utilities to create a program that not only is effective, but is the #1 most energy efficient state in the nation, but that they're interested and they're not actively blocking. So when you hear the Baker-Polito administration, and it's really not you guys who are, I think, responsible for framing the discussion. I think it is driven by the utilities. They're basically preaching, what are the costs? So you ask, what are the costs, or what is the impact for low-income ratepayers? I would tell you that as a low-income ratepayer, you can take advantage of community solar. Our program is a 15% discount to low-income ratepayers. If you ask someone from utilities or the administration, they'll say, what is the cost of that program? What energy efficiency did is they created a cost-benefit test. So they looked at both the costs and the benefits, and they were able to really accurately project and determine what that, at what point was it beneficial to pursue energy efficiency. That, combined with incentivizing utilities to go after it, has allowed energy efficiency to boom. We've really done, solar has not done a good job of doing either. We haven't come up with a strong test, partially blocked by the utilities who are reluctant to provide data, and we haven't created an incentive structure to align utilities to advocate and help and move solar along. So this cap raise is a short-term fix, and it's a tough business climate to operate.
Sure, I've just this one discrepancy. So the new net metering formula would mean that people who produce electricity during the daytime will sell that electricity for less than the electricity they purchase during the night.
Not for residential,
Okay.
and not for
municipal.
municipalities.
So for who's left then?
Well,
Large ground mount solar projects.
well, really, community solar.
Yeah.
Okay,
Joe
so
is
community
also-
So
Right.
we will develop projects, and predominantly what our model was developing ground mount systems and selling it directly to municipalities. In that situation, we're still getting the full retail rate, which is why we supported this legislation. On the community solar side, which is really what drives, it's really how you pass the benefits of solar to ratepayers that can't put solar on the roof, or they don't want to put solar on the roof. We're taking a 60% or 40% cut there.
Okay. So and that's during peak times, the daytime.
Regardless, whenever you're producing
So
excess
I'm
electricity.
wondering how you square the fact that the state is saying that for those people, they should be paid less during peak with the Northfield Mount Herman pump storage station, which exists precisely because they pay less for the electricity they use at night to pump the water uphill than they do for the electricity they make by dropping the water back downhill during the daytime. So I'm wondering, how, if any kind of a policy point of view, you can square allowing, one entity to make money by buying low and selling high, and require another entity to buy high and sell low. I just don't understand how that, it seems like there's a real incongruity there.
Can I make a comment on that question or that statement at the end? Which is, it's very regressive. It is exactly backwards to allow a for-profit entity to buy electricity at one time of day, waste a certain portion of it in pumping losses, and make money by selling it at another time during the day. And to take the potential for low-income people, moderate-income people that can't put solar on their own roofs,
Or
and
pump
allow,
water at night.
and allow them to do not exactly the same thing, but do a one-for-one. I will give it to you when you need it, My system will produce power for you when power is $1 a kilowatt, because it's all the high-price generators that are putting. So what I will do is I will reduce the cost. I will suppress the cost for everyone in that region. I'll suppress the cost for everyone in the Commonwealth. But I want a one-for-one trade. That's not allowed. That's regressive.
Yeah, just real quick. So in terms of what composes a retail rate bill, so a retail rate bill is about 15 to 20% cents a kilowatt hour. There's 4 basic components of the bill. You have basic service, you have transmission, you have transition, and you have distribution. The actual cost of the energy, which is what the utilities procure and then provide to you, is about 3 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's what they would normally pay to procure your energy, that they then pass that on to you. There's other, the other charges are in there, and that's what you pay at the end of the day. But the cost of energy is about 5 to 6 cents or 3 to 6 cents, depending on what the ISO wholesale rate is. So in terms of what people should be credited at, and when considering that, I mean, essentially when you're selling, if I'm a hospital and I'm selling my energy back to the grid, or if I'm just a large project, a large ground mount project, and I'm selling it back to the grid, I'm getting paid at a premium for the actual energy. I'm not getting paid like other generators. So other generators would get paid anywhere between 3 and 6 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what the ISO wholesale rate is. So I'm getting paid for those other charges. The distribution charge, for example, is the charge that you pay for the distribution system. So you pay to use the wires and the poles in the grid. And essentially they're paying you for the distribution system, when really you should be paying them for the distribution system. And that's one of the discussions around the minimum bill, and the fact that folks that are benefiting, if you're a net metering customer and you're benefiting from use of the distribution system, you should be actually, if you're generating, particularly if you're generating electricity all of the time back to the grid, you should be paying for the use of the wires and the poles. So that's one of the, I mean, it is up for debate, but that is one of the rationales.
I guess I don't understand how that's different from the large producers.
I would just say, in the interest of getting a few more questions in, since we're running out of time, if we could continue this one afterwards, and then get a couple more questions in.
Yes, I very much respect everything you guys are talking about, but I would like to ask a question about more long-term vision. All the discussion we've had so far has to do with an assumption, I feel, that a given solar panel is producing a predictable and stable amount of energy, and that all the cost calculations are based on technology as it exists today. Now, there's a big difference between a panel that will generate 240 watts versus one that will produce 260 watts on the same size panel. I think going forward we're going to be seeing orders of magnitude increases in efficiency of these panels, which is going to drop the cost of actually generating electricity in any one of these systems exponentially. And I'm wondering what will be the impact of that kind of technological improvement going forward, as opposed to just arguing about what's going on with things exactly as they exist today. Things are moving so fast technologically. I think in 5 years, 6 years, we're going to see a major improvement in efficiency of these panels.
In terms of cost impact, that increases the delta that non-participant ratepayers pay, because as the cost of installation goes down and the price that, net metering continues to go up as distribution and those costs continue to increase, that delta, that difference, is paid for by non-participant ratepayers,
So you're saying it's going to make it worse?
essentially.
So
That's counterintuitive.
That is no. I mean, so if we're a developer and the costs go down, the market reacts, and we're very responsive. And there's 400 solar companies. If we're able to get, if we're able to go down from $2 a watt to $1.95, we will. That's a competitive advantage, and the reason that's a competitive advantage is because we can offer a lower price to the customer, to the end-use customer. So if the price of technology as it continues to go down, the developer offers a better discount, a better price to the buyer. It's an open market. It's not a utility market where you have one player. We're actively fighting to procure customers, and so it's an interesting question because these are these panels last for 20, 40 years. So, you install a system at today's technology,
Right.
the technology, there's a good chance it's inferior to technology on a system that's developed 8 years later. There's no doubt about that, but it's a benefit. I mean, technology costs go down, that's a benefit that is passed along.
Yeah, don't misunderstand it. It definitely is a benefit to have the technological advancements. I was just talking in terms of what the cost of, as the subsidies continue to go up. Because right now the subsidy levels have stayed the same. They were intended to jumpstart the industry. And what's essentially happened is the cost has continued to go down as the subsidy levels have remained the same. So that being said, the technological advancement is obviously a benefit. I mean, to my earlier point about energy storage, that's one of the things that we're really looking into, because that is going to provide a huge benefit as that technology advances for solar, because that'll allow us to provide solar back to the grid real time when the demand is high.
All right, so we just have one more question. I think that we have time for the back.
Oh, Bill has had his hand up
Hi,
for
sir.
Oh wait, what am I missing? All right, we'll go 1, 2. I'm sorry. We'll put them both.
So just to provide a little context, because it makes sense. So I think I've been an active proponent of solar for 35 years, so that's sort of baseline. I'm also a municipal elected official, but I'm speaking as a resident because I think potential legal reasons. So I want to talk about the SREG program and the way it's designed, and as I think the Commissioner of Education talked about, Boston-centric versus out here. So in December 2014, DOER, which I commend, basically said, don't big ground-mounted commercial in farmland and forest land. But then in the SREC 2, there's an exemption for if you supply affordable housing units, then you get actually bumped up and you get credits and points. So the benefit of Western Mass is there's lots of land. But there's agricultural land, there's forest land, which has carbon sequestration, lots of benefits to that. I would advocate for, I guess the other thing is, what struck me, it's Joe, right? Not applying it to you, but the word frenzy, that's what I see as there's a frenzy of outside of state commercial investment to say, this is a market we can make money. So there's lots of 400 who are coming in saying we can make money and then leave. And it's not about responsiveness to the town. So if there was a project that was actually helping people in the towns, I'm all for it. What's interesting is that coming in and developing the town, but then you have to feed back to the grid, and then the energy supposedly is going to an affordable housing unit. So there's really no benefit except for pilot, and that's negotiable and it's limited. So you can make, it is limited, depending on what the profit margin is. So I think one of the things that would be interesting is going forward with SREC 3 is to figure out if we're a place where you can develop, because we have open space, and we want to preserve agriculture, because we need that for sustainability, and we want to preserve forest land, how do we do it in a responsible way, number one, and two, in a responsive way so that the town is actually benefiting, whether it's not just being a receptacle for investment to come in, carve up some stuff and take the money out of state, and hopefully benefit the municipal. The community bills are great, but I'm seeing there's a lot of sharks coming in, sort of taking advantage of zoning regs.
Absolutely. One of the things we actually, to your point, that we've heard from the land community, our land team has heard, is about greenfield development in terms of big open fields versus brownfield development or landfill development, and how there are concerns about whether or not we should be incenting development of wide open fields that could otherwise be used for, recreation, active and passive recreation. That is something that we're hearing in the development of the next program. We obviously look forward to holding a bunch of robust public meetings and whatnot, and there will be an opportunity to provide feedback on that, but that's something we are aware of. To your point about providing direct benefits back to the community, that is one of the things that Governor Baker and the House and the Senate agreed upon in the current legislation. And if you actually look at the section that relative to the DOER Next Generation Incentive, it specifically says that the direct benefits need to be provided back to those municipal customers, those low-income customers, because we understand in that development model that in many ways it is designed to make sure that the developer profits. And you don't necessarily as a town see the full benefits that you would otherwise get if you didn't lease it, for example. If you owned it yourself, the benefits that you would receive would be significantly higher than that if you were leasing as a low-income customer or as a municipality. So that's one of the things that we are well aware of. That's one of the things that the legislature, the House and the Senate, and the governor saw and identified, and it did actually make it into the final bill, and is something that we're looking forward to taking a look at in the next program.
And with Bill?
We have to remember in talking about this that there is another thing happening globally that is driving solar, wind, etc., and that's climate change. And we are nitpicking at percentages of raising caps. An old boss of mine used to say that we're milking mice. Unless we stop doing that, I mean, we have to understand there's no such thing as no impact energy. It's going to hurt something, but we need it, because if we don't do it now and we don't push it as hard as we possibly can, there will be no long-term planning. There won't be need for long-term planning because your office will be underwater.
That's
You'll
right.
probably be okay out here.
That's right. You know Boston. That's right.
The fact of the matter is that every scientific article that you read these days says that it's happening faster than we thought it was. And when we start sitting around and talking about small percentage increases in caps, all that we're doing is making matters worse. We have to accept the fact that it's going to cost somebody money. It would be better if it cost money to people who had it than didn't, which would be the utilities, the more expensive, the higher income ratepayers, and the Baker administration and whomever else is in office has got to realize this. They're playing around with a much bigger problem. And unless they stop doing this and push solar as hard and as fast as they can, and I might add wind, there's no point in spending one nickel on long-term planning, because they won't be there.
All of our productions at GCTV are brought to you in part by The Arbors at Greenfield, assisted living community providing a unique balance of independence and personal care that offers residents and families the most precious gift of all, peace of mind. Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com, call them at 773-0838, and check them out on Facebook. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all the productions at Greenfield Community Television.